I talked about me being a convention of states person. I've talked to legislators that are like, I just don't like it because there's too many of you guys around. Like, really? And then I'll ask them, I've had a couple, well, do you even know what it is? Yeah, I just don't even care to know what it is. Because it's like everywhere I look, there's somebody with a COS shirt on. And I'm like, well, you should ask one of us what it is. How about I tell you? And this actual legislator told me, I want to know, but not right now. He said, it's just I said, well, right now it's just you and I in your office. He said, yeah, but I just don't want to know right now. I said, well, here's my cell. You call me when you're ready to talk about it. He said, so you're not going to try to push it down my throat? Like, no. See, that's how we discourage people from Christ, from our points of view on issues, because we try to push it on them. I want you, when you're ready to talk, I want you to reach out to me. Now we can talk about it. Why? Because you're open to it. And you're going to be receptive to whatever I have to share with you. And so one of the things that I get into, and there's a lot of groups that you'll see out here that have different perspectives on the Article 5 Convention of States, and they talk about a constitutional convention and a convention of states, which are two different things. And I'm going to have Mark explain that for you guys. So when these crazy people come tell you, we don't need a constitutional convention, well, I'm not talking about a constitutional convention. So Mark's going to give you guys some clarity. So you're going to want to take some notes. And you're going to want to watch this video again and again and again so you can get it in you. So I'm going to let Mark take this moment and explain to you the difference between a constitutional convention and a convention of states, and how and why we believe that our forefathers laid this out for us, and why this is the perfect time for us to enact this.
Yeah, so we're going to do a little history here, if y'all don't mind. I always have to refresh myself. Remember, I went to school in Los Angeles, so I'll do my best here. If you go back to the convention in 1787, we all know the stories about the convention. You know, it's there in Philadelphia. It's in the hall. It's a hot summer. The windows are all boarded up. It's all done in private. September 15th, 1787 is 2 days before the end of that convention. They've been in that hall for 3 months. They've argued about everything. It's been very difficult. Convention almost broke up 3 different times. Franklin calls for prayer, invokes the mighty hand of providence. They make it through. September 15th, 1787 is a very important day in history. I'm very focused on September 15th. It's a day that I will never forget because that's my wife's birthday, and Patty gets very angry if I forget her birthday. So that's one reason. But it's also because that's the day that this clause of Article 5 is introduced at convention. So imagine they're 2 days from the end of convention. They don't have computers, so probably all the hand calligraphy is already done. And Colonel George Mason stands up and he says to the men assembled there in the hall, we've made a terrible mistake. We created this Constitution. It gives the right to Congress to propose amendments if they deem them necessary, but it does not give the same right to the people acting through the states. And he says, are we so naive that we believe that a government that becomes a tyranny will ever propose amendments to restrain its own tyranny? Yeah, and I hear a few people giggle about that. I imagine they all laughed out loud. And I think we can almost know that. We don't have video, obviously, or audio recording, but we have Madison's notes. Madison's notes at that point say 2 Latin words, abbreviations, nin com, which stands for no comment or no debate. So in other words, Mason has laid out this radical idea that we give the states the power to propose amendments to the Constitution by calling a convention, an amending convention, and nobody argues with them. Remember, they argued about everything. They argued about how to argue, about whether to pray, about literally everything. But about this, they all just agree. I consider it a forehead slap moment. They all said, of course we got to do that. And we also know that because when they voted on it immediately thereafter, it was actually the actual language is introduced by Eldridge Gary. We know Eldridge Gary, he's the guy that invented what we call gerrymandering.
Yes.
So Eldridge Gary introduces the actual language. It's voted on. It is unanimously adopted. It's the only thing I'm aware of in the United States Constitution that was suggested, not debated, no debate over the issue, and then unanimously approved as part of the United States Constitution. So there was no doubt to the framers of the Constitution who understood the Bible, who understood history, who understood human nature that we were going to need this. Why? Because they knew that people love power. we're sinners, we're fallen, and when we start to gather power, we want more power, and we protect our power. And they knew that the federal government would get out of control. And they feared a strong central federal government. That's how they had come to this moment in history. They'd been through a tyranny, and then they'd set up a government that had no central power in the Articles of Confederation. So they knew that at some point, we in the states were going to have to call a convention and propose amendments to restrain federal tyranny. So fast forward to where we are today. Today we have the oldest living constitution in the world. By living constitution, I want to be clear. I don't mean what the left says, which means you can make it say whatever you want, whenever you want to. I mean it's a constitution that's been in continuous effect for now almost 250 years. The average life of a constitution in the world, anybody know what the average is? 17 years. Of all constitutions ever drafted in the world, 17 years is the average life. So here we are almost 250 years. The reason is that our Constitution is drafted around eternal principles, things that never change, right? All of those things are the same back then in 1787 or 1789 during ratification as they are today because they're principles. They're not policies, right? They're not things that change with the times. These are principles about how we're going to govern ourselves. So that gets put in place. Fast forward to where we are today. In that original document in 1787, they put in 17 enumerated powers for the federal government. 17 powers that the government was supposed to be limited to, all the rest for the people in the states. How many powers does the federal government have now? Millions.
Yes.
I say 17 million, right? I don't know how many. Infinite power. They have the power over everything. They have the power to decide what kind of fuel you put in your car, what kind of materials you build your house out of, how you use your land. For God's sake, they have the power to decide how much water your toilet flushes. I mean, this is an unbelievable amount of power that the framers would have never tolerated the federal government has now. So they've gone way outside of these 17 enumerated powers areas. And so we all know, they've overstepped grossly. So what do? Well, Troy, I think we have a few choices. We're at a fork in the road right now. We have the choice of, I hear this, by the way, from folks pretty regularly, we just need to arm up and have a good civil war. The arm up part I agree with, by the way. But a civil war, look, for anybody who's ever, do we have any combat vets in the audience? Anybody who's actually seen combat? Look, you guys know what I'm talking about. I've not been there. I know a lot of people who have. And if I say to you, we should have a civil war, every combat, you're shaking your head. Every combat veteran I've ever talked to, if they're being real polite, they'll say, you're out of your freaking mind.
Exactly.
You have no idea what you're talking about. You want to see what that looks like? Look at Israel right now, right? Turn on TV and look at dead children and women and rape and pillage. That's what happens when you have a civil war. Mm-hmm. And so it's not pretty, it's not good, and we shouldn't go there. That's one of the choices, right? Another choice is just secession. I hear this. We're in Texas, right? So we're going to secede from the... By the way, I love the sound of that. I got to admit, I like the narrative of secession. It's a good narrative. The reality, not so pretty. Look, if you look at the idea of secession, try to think about how we get that done peacefully. Let's talk about Texas. Texas is a good red state, well, except for Dallas, and I mean maybe Houston and San Antonio and Austin and El Paso and
Lubbock.
Lubbock. I mean, how do you divide up Texas, right? Thank God we still are a red state to some extent. You know, some of my really good conservative friends say we could just make all the Democrats leave. I get why they say that, but I just don't think that's practical. California, where I originally come from, 85% of the geography is red as that beautiful jacket you're wearing. So, but the state's controlled by the blue areas, right? How do you divide that up? You can't. So secession is not legitimate. And one last thing I want to say about secession for those of us here in Texas that believe that maybe we should secede, I have one word for you: China.
Yes.
Are we going to face off against China as Texas? Good luck. No, we'll be a Chinese province before we know it if we think that we can do that on our own. So we need each other. We face existential threats all across this country, all across the world. We're seeing that kind of an existential threat in Israel right now. Islamofascism is an existential threat. The cartels on our border, militarized cartels, are now an existential threat. We have China as an existential threat. we face a lot of existential threats. So we have to decide what we're going to do about these existential threats. I think we got to stay together. How do you stay together in a country that's coming apart? Do you guys think we're coming apart?
Amen.
Yeah, we're coming apart for sure.
Quickly.
Right? I mean, it seems like, I don't know about you, but I look out there and I think, well, okay, they want to kill babies. They want to turn men into women. They want to make sure that we're all racist. They want to make sure that brothers like you and I hate each other. That's a really important part of the program. All the stuff, and I look at that and I look at people like that and I think, man, I'm not sure I can live in a country with those people anymore. I'm not even sure I want to. But then what they say when they look at us is something very similar. They look at a guy like me, speaking for myself. I'm a 61-year-old white guy. I'm a Bible-thumping, gun-toting, Tea Party-ing Christian.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
I get applause here. That might bring gunfire in San Francisco, right? So they look at me like that, and they say, I'm not sure I can live in a country with somebody like you. So what do we do about this? And I say the framers knew what we would do. They knew this time would come, and they said, we're going to give you a form of government specifically designed for people who hate each other. Seriously, if you go back to the convention in 1787, there was no love lost among the states at that point. There were the southern agrarian states, slave states. There were northern free states that were quote-unquote industrialized states, machine-driven states. They didn't like each other. They didn't trust each other. They didn't know each other. They were like foreign countries to each other. And the only way that they could possibly live together was to make sure that they didn't have very much power over each other. So that New York could be New York, and Massachusetts could be Massachusetts, and Virginia could be Virginia. You know, we didn't have a Texas back then. That's probably why it wasn't quite perfect, but they knew that they didn't like each other, but they had existential threats that they had to face off against. They had England was an existential threat. France was still an existential threat. Spain was an existential threat. They had the frontier, and they had American Indians that they were fighting out. So all this stuff was a threat. They had to be together. Right. And the tool to do that is federalism. The tool to do that is to say, look, I don't really care what you do in New York for the most part. Abide by the Constitution and its 17 enumerated powers to the federal government. We'll do foreign trade together. We'll do foreign relations together. We'll protect our borders. A few things we're going to do together. Other than that, we leave each other alone. Right. And that allowed people who don't really like each other, same as we are today, to live together in a very big, diverse country. You will have people tell you who are opposed to what we're doing with Convention of States, it's going to be a runaway convention. And they will call it a constitutional convention. I want to be very clear. I'm not a big word guy. I hate big words. I'm going to use a big word. There's a legal word. A constitutional convention is what's called a plenipotentiary convention. It's a big word. All it means is they can do anything they want. That's what a constitutional means. They're going to draft a constitution. They start from scratch. They do anything they want. That's what a constitutional convention is. We're dealing with a legal document here. Legal language matters. People who say that a constitutional convention and an Article 5 convention for proposing amendments are the same thing are lying to you. I used to say they were mistaken or ignorant. Now they know. We've proven it. We've said it millions of times, literally in public, in thousands and thousands of events like this on the web. Scholars have talked about this. An Article 5 amending Constitution operates under our current Constitution. It is limited to whatever the states say it's limited to. In the case of this convention, it's limited to three things, to talking about term limits. Anybody think we need term limits? Yeah. Yeah, not just, and by the way, not just term limits on Congress. How about term limits on the deep state, on bureaucrats and staff? Amen. I call that the Fauci Amendment. Amen. Right? Amen. We need the Fauci Amendment. So term limits. The second thing is anything that would impose fiscal restraints on the federal government. Anybody think that the federal government is fiscally out of control? Yeah. Definitely. So that's the second area, like a balanced budget amendment. Yes. How about limiting taxes or spending to maybe limiting to population growth plus inflation or something? Like there's all kinds of formulas we could use. Are they going to stop spending without us limiting them? No. Don't you love the little fake debt ceiling fights we have every year? Let's all pretend we're going to fight over the debt ceiling, and then I'm so surprised they raised the debt ceiling. I got to tell you a little side story. When I first went to Capitol Hill, Troy, I was sitting in a congressman's office. I actually think it was Louis Gohmert's office. And this is my first experience in Washington, D.C. very heady times. The Tea Party class has been elected. There's this huge fight taking place over the first debt ceiling fight. I'm sitting in his office. It's almost midnight. They're on the floor. They're yelling at each other. They're practically throwing stuff at each other. And I'm glued to the TV in this congressman's office. And one of the staffers looks at me and he goes, "You think that's real, don't you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Oh, we cut the deal 2 weeks ago." He said, "That's how it works here. We just know, the Republicans know if we don't fight to the last minute,
right, our
constituents like you, well, you'll be mad. And then the Democrats know the same thing." He said, "So they'll fix it at midnight or quarter after midnight. Yeah. And everybody go home and wipe the sweat from their brows, and they'll tell you how they fought till the last minute." So this is how it works in Washington, D.C. They're not going to stop spending until we make them stop spending or until they create a complete world economic collapse. So those are the two choices. So we need to put some kind of fiscal restraints on them. Here's one more fiscal restraint. There's something called generally accepted accounting principles. In the business world, that's called GAAP. Yeah. And it means that we all account the same way. If you don't agree to use the same system, you know, if you can say 2 + 2 is 5 and I say 2 + 2 is 4, then you don't have any accounting. The federal government doesn't use GAAP. I was sitting at the Office of Management and Budget. This is, again, during the same time period in the Tea Party. We had access to all these offices. And I was sitting around with a bunch of senior officials at the OMB. These guys control all the money. They talk about how much it's actually going to cost for stuff. And I said, "I understand you guys don't use GAAP here at the federal government." They said, "That's right." And I said, "Well, what principles do you use?" And they said, tellingly, "Oh, we don't have any principles." I said, "I wasn't talking about your value set. I want to know." And they literally don't. I call it unicorns and Skittles. That's what they do. They just pretend accounting. So we're going to have to fix that. The third thing is what we call limitations on scope and jurisdiction. The fundamental problem in D.C. is that they have exceeded the enumerated powers. Yes. This is the thing, right? I would challenge anybody to show me in the Constitution where it says that the federal government can spend money on education. Right. They can't. It's not in the Constitution. It's not one of the enumerated powers. The courts magically waved a wand and granted this. How do I know this for sure? There's a series of letters between Thomas Jefferson and his closest friend, William Henry Lee. Great letters. If you want to understand who Jefferson was, this is the best way. Read this series of letters. They wrote a lot back and forth. They didn't have text or WhatsApp back then, so they had to do letters. There's a particular letter where Lee says to Jefferson is founding up University of Virginia. Great proponent of public education. He said, "We've got to educate our citizens or we won't be able to keep our government." Right. So he's forming up University of Virginia, and Lee says, "You should get the federal government to give that some money. You know, this is really important for the country." And Jefferson writes back and says, "I can't do that. That's unconstitutional. We would need an education amendment." Can anybody point out the education amendment to me? Like, there's 27. I know what they are. It's not in there. The courts granted that power. In fact, there's no power, Troy, in the Constitution that authorizes the DEA, the FDA, the USDA, the EPA, name the alphabet soup of agencies. The vast majority of these agencies are outside the constitutional purview of the federal government. Right. So if the federal government is does anybody disagree the federal government's overstepped?
No.
I was going to ask Israel to show you the door. If you... No, we all know they've overstepped. By the way, people on the left, a lot of people, regular Democrats, I don't mean leftists, regular Democrats think the federal government oversteps all the time. I hear this from Democrats. And so if we all believe that, what do? I know what we do, Troy. I've done this. It works so well. You go to Washington, D.C., and you say, "Would you please stop overstepping?" Does that work? Oh, I know. I got a better idea. Let's elect the largest swing class in the history of Congress. We did this in 2010. Yeah. And then they'll fix everything for us, right?
Didn't happen.
Okay, how about this? Let's add the Senate to that. If we have the Senate and the House of Representatives, then they'll balance their budget, right? And
no, not going to happen.
No, that didn't happen, right? Okay, I got the solution. Here's the solution. Let's have the House and the Senate, and then let's elect Donald Trump president, and then they'll fix everything, right?
No.
So, you know that the House of Representatives and the Senate put on President Obama's desk 8 times the repeal of Obamacare. Do you think that President Obama was ever going to sign the repeal of Obamacare?
No.
They knew that, right? They knew. It's an act. So when you get President Trump, he said, I will sign it the second it comes to my desk, right? The repeal of Obamacare. Do you know how many times they sent it to his desk? Okay, this is really important. This is maybe the most important thing I'm going to say to you. We had the House, we had the Senate, and we had, I would argue, the most conservative president in my entire lifetime.
Yeah.
The bull in the china shop, the guy willing to throw the punches. We did not balance the budget. We spent more than ever. We did not limit the power of the federal government. Bureaucracy continued to grow. And I would say in that case, despite his best efforts,
yes.
right? The beast is out of the cage and it's out of control. We have a remedy. That remedy is called a convention of states. When 34 states say they want to call that convention, we can propose amendments, and those amendments can specifically be intended to restrain the federal government. I'm going to say one last thing. Happy to go to questions or whatever you want to do, Troy.
Yes.
People are going to tell you, oh my God, it's so scary though, that convention can get out of control and they're going to repeal the Second Amendment. You'll hear this, I promise you.
A lot.
A lot. I hear it over and over from the same people over and over. By the way, the same people who defeated the Balanced Budget Amendment Convention in 1982 when the deficit was the debt was $4 trillion. I pray for a $4 trillion debt today.
Yeah.
Right? Same people. And I'm not just talking people on the left. It's everybody on the left.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about folks on the right, some of your friends and my friends and your friends. And they're going to tell you, oh, I'm so scared. I'm so worried. I'm so fearful. First, I say to those people, thank God you weren't there to fight the American Revolution.
Right.
Because you'd have just gone and hid in the corner while a bunch of other people fought. But the main thing is, like, they say, we're going to repeal the Second Amendment. I want to be really clear. I'm a fanatical Second Amendment fanatic. We build guns in my family. My son's a Marine. My mom's a retired sheriff. Like, we are crazy Second Amendment folks, right? Any Second Amendment lovers? And Troy told me they'd be security. I said, don't worry, I always bring my own. So they say this, and so I want you to just understand why this is so ridiculous. Today in the United States of America, there are 27 states with constitutional carry. I'm proud to say Texas is now among them. That means no permit. You want a gun, you go buy a gun, you put it on your hip, and you carry it. 27 states. Can do the math, even though I'm from LA. That's a majority of states in the United States of America. Right? 24 states allow you to carry your handgun into the legislature. Texas, by the way, has a fast pass lane if you're carrying your gun in the legislature.
Yes.
It's pretty cool. You can skip the line and you walk right in. And so you can go, so 24 states, I've done that in most of the states that allow it because I travel all over the country. There are 14 states that allow you to take a long gun, like maybe your favorite AR, put one in the chamber, sling it across your back, carry it into the legislature, and sit in the gallery and watch the proceedings.
Yes.
I'm not saying that's a great idea, but you can do that.
Yes.
Right? Do the math. It takes 38 states to ratify any amendment. If there are 27 states that have constitutional carry, if there are 24 states that allow you to carry your handgun in a state legislature, if there are 14 states that allow you to carry your AR into the legislature, do you really think we can't find 13 states to stop the repeal of the Second Amendment? I'm going to be blunt. It's insane. Right. And it's disingenuous. It's dishonest. Amen. And the people who say this to you now, who tell you there can be a runaway convention, this is what I would say. At this point, I'm going to be way more blunt than I used to be. I used to say that they just don't understand, and I'd get a little bit more frustrated, and after I moved to Texas, I'd say, well, bless their hearts. Now I'm even more blunt. I'm more New Yorker-ish about it. And I say, they're either liars or fools. And that's what they are. And they are now, if folks say that to you, they're on the right, and I'll offend people when I say this. I'm okay with that. Jesus wasn't above giving offense, so I'm not above giving offense. I say that they are tools of the left.
Yes.
Right? These are people that are spouting leftist talking points in conservative circles. The reason we have the runaway convention argument, it was invented by the radical left in the United States of America to keep conservatives from using the Constitution to save the Constitution.
Right.
And I will tell you, there's one last thing that's super important for me to say, which is I do this because I believe. I do this because I feel like this is what I've been called by God to do. I don't do this because I want to do this, right? What I would rather be doing, honestly, I'd rather be an entrepreneur, building companies, making money. I'm a horse guy. I volunteer at a ranch near my house. I'd rather be riding horses and teaching kids to ride. I'd rather be doing all that stuff instead of doing what I do. But I believe we are losing our country. And I believe that Washington, D.C. does not give a darn about the fact that we're losing. They're all making money while we lose our country. And I will fight until there is no more fight in me. People ask me, well, it gets hard, and it does get hard out there. Will you ever quit? And I say, there is a time that will come when I will quit. I will quit when that first shovel full of dirt hits the top of my pine box. That's when I'll give up.
That's right. Amen. Amen.